Let's start with JavaScript closures today. To begin, first I'll just briefly walk through the scope chain in JavaScript. So, you must be aware that in JavaScript, there is a scope chain. So, all the inner objects have access to the outer functions, outer scope. Here, if you see in this function will be able to access the variable defined in the outer scope. And if there are any global variables declared, for example, say test is equal to 5 declared over here. So this test variable is a global variable and it will be accessible inside all the blocks that are defined on this JavaScript page. So what are closures? Closures are nothing but just special kind of objects that are combining a function and the environment in which it was created. So what does it mean? It means that there's an inner function which has access to the outer function variables. So what happens here is we have this function introduction, which is taking a parameter as first name. And this is a variable intro defined in this function. Now we have an inner function inside this introduction, which is name, which is taking another parameter. So using the concept of the scope chain, we can access this outer variable intro as well as the parameter first name inside this inner function. And now we are simply returning this function name. So another concept about function is to enable to return a function, you need to put parentheses in front of it. That's the way we return a function, the value of the function. So here we see that we have returned introduction, which was this outer function, and we are passing this parameter Sakshi in the first name. So what this will return? It will return name, which is again another function. So welcome object here, welcome, it will be containing the value of this return name, which is a function. And now to get what this name is executing, we'll have to again return this function. So we have to put another parenthesis and pass the argument for last name over here. So this intro, what it will contain now, we have set this in this paragraph, which is the name Sakshi Jain. So to understand closures, what its functionality is, here we have already returned the outer function, but still we have access to the variables and the functionality returned inside this outer function. So even after the scope of outer function is finished, we can still get access to the inner function variable through closure. Because when this function was returned, the inner function, which is the closure, it preserved the value of the variable which was declared inside this introduction, the outer function. However, you cannot directly access intro, the variable declared over here, anywhere outside this function. But through this inner function closure, which has already kind of preserved the value of the outer function, we can still access this. So these are like the basic advantages of using closures, that you can preserve the value, the environment, the scope chain of the outer function in the inner function. And one more thing to notice, which I have mentioned here in point number 2, is the closures, they store the value by reference of the outer function. So in case we change the value of intro later on, then the value which is returned by the inner function will also get changed. So because it is just storing a reference to the variables of the outer function, not the actual value. So we'll cover more in the second slide. Okay.